that's true. Naked Palpatine.
Oh, you pick that one. Fresh out of the clone tank, nude Palpatine is my
Well, that's the first thing I think of when you say Dark Empire Palpatine. Hello everybody. Welcome to, well, for you, the first video of 2026. Which means in a few days' time, I'll be 25 and I will cease to be a young adult and just be an adult, which I don't feel like I've earned becoming. But here we are. I've read The Road by Carmac McCarthy, and I did in fact also watch the film with Aragorn himself. Both were good. The movie's pretty faithful other than the liberties with the end. There's really not too much to say. There's not too many characters. There's a handful of opponents, I would say. There's a handful of decent folk. But by and large, this is the story of two people. The son and the father, the man and the child. If you wish to know if this is a post-apocalypse story, you know, and especially in this day and age. And this came out, like 2006? We were so used to that. You know, we have The Walking Dead now. We have thousands of other things. We have a lot of video games like Left 4 Dead, to DayZ, to this, to that, all Call of Duty zombies. We have so many examples of a post-apocalypse now that it's kind of oversaturated. But if you are the type of person who needs to know, oh, why did this apocalypse happen? You're going to be disappointed. That is not what the story's about. You don't get any of those answers in terms of what actually made the world the way it is. All that matters is that the world for you is that man and his son. That is your world through the entirety of these pages. And in the McCarthy style, you know, the punctuation stuff is a bit weird. It might take some getting used to if you've never read a McCarthy novel before, but if you are, it's fine. It's probably one of the bleakest, most desolate, darkest books of his catalog, which is surprising because before this I read Blood Meridian at the very end of the year of 2025. And it's like, how do you get darker than that? Well, here you go. But the difference is the light and hope that is within this novel that I feel is not in the other ones. But like I said, there's not much to be said. And even in terms of spoilers, I don't really have that much to talk about. It's really you just sitting here with these two people for all these pages and just being in that. It's really isolating. You feel really alone. And of course, McCarthy has some great dialogue in here, whether it be between the father and son or other characters they may come upon later on. There's some good dialogue in here. And this is probably the easiest to translate to film, next to No Country for Old Men, which we'll get to in the future, someday. I'm definitely going through all the McCarthy catalog now. Don't think I'm not. But this is a book that hits hard no matter where you're at. But it's going to hit you hard in different ways depending on where you're at. I'm not a father. I don't even really have a partner right now or anything of the sort. I am ignorant on many ways of being an adult other than paying taxes and driving. I don't get too much into real life, but you know, there's a lot of things that people younger than me have done that I have yet to do, and I guess I'll leave it there. So, you know, but I know it's like to feel like you've fallen in love, so I can semi-understand the husband when he gets the man when he gets flashbacks of his wife and stuff. But as to a father, I cannot understand. But I can imagine hoping for a father like this in a time like this at that age, if that time ever came. We should all have a dad that's so. We should all hope to have a dad that's so dedicated. But it's a really moving book, and it's not particularly long. Movie's also great, but I don't know how to adequately describe this book to you. I suppose I'll say, and this won't make sense if you've never read Blood Meridian, but to those of you who have, who just goes through all the McCarthy review catalog on YouTube, I guess. There's an interesting thing if you try to be in the perspective of somebody like me, who does the McCarthy books certainly cannot be like a MCU where everything connects in terms of characters and stuff. But I think it can be an MCU or a Cosmere, if you want to go that route, for fantasy books, in terms of thematically all these fitting. I mean, if you look at it, it kind of works like that. I mean, you have Blood Meridian, which shows some of the worst aspects in the Old West. You have a couple books like All the Pretty Horses and stuff like that, which are a bit more positive. I haven't read them yet, but I know they're not as dark. No Country for Old Men, which is definitely a spiritual successor to Blood Meridian, and then this. What happens when the god, which is war, wins? How can anybody be dancing when everybody's gone? And yet, throughout this book, we see light in the form of the sun, and how he keeps the fire burning, as the book likes to go on about, keeping the fire lit, and just being a positive force. It's so easy, especially in a world like this, to go hollow, to go dark. You also get if you're a video gamer, you may think of Dark Souls with kindling the flame, or going hollow. But there are multiple instances where if the man was by himself, he'd probably be a worse off person. Part of the thing that keeps him decent is his son, and the son's innocence, and the son's kindness. So, I think that's, for a book that's probably the bleakest, it remains probably the most hopeful, at least of the two books I've read so far. And do I recommend it? Absolutely. You have to read this book for yourself. It will affect you. And I imagine if you're a father, it will affect you in a completely different way than it affected me. But it's solid, it's good. I'm not particularly good with words. The prose are good. I love this story. I don't know if I personally like it more than Blood Meridian. Other people are going to love this way more than Blood Meridian, because I know Blood Meridian is the very controversial book. But pretty much everyone who reads this seems to relatively enjoy it. But there's no zombies, no big natural disasters, and there's some things. But as I said, it is mostly father and son walking through the apocalypse, encountering some decent folk and some not so decent folk, and what happens along the way. And do you keep that fire lit? I think another important thing, things that just came up as I was reading it, what are they living for? Because I'll get into a big scene in spoilers. But what are they even living for? Right? They're surviving day to day. But if you think about the past, look at caveman times and stuff. It's not like, I'm sure they had their art and they had their stories. We just don't think about it, but we just think of them as primitive and dumb. But they had a culture. They had something going on. So I'm sure they found ways to entertain themselves. But by and large, they were surviving day by day. And then we eventually got to where we are now. So is it invalid if you do that later on after an apocalypse? Do you give up on no hope of a future? Or do you power on and hope that one day things can rebuild? Or, especially in modern day, suicide is a rather big thing in America, at least. And I'm sure it's big around the world. People feeling helpless. Things help with that, whether that be family, friends, religion. Those things can help mitigate those things. But by and large, even if you're religious, like I am. I don't talk about that often on the channel. It comes up here and there when I feel it's relevant. I'm not here to preach to you. But the thing, even with that belief, I still work from 10:30 to 7, doing a job that realistically anybody can do, and think, I'm not a father. I'm not a husband. I'm not living for anybody but me. Working a job that I'm not uberly passionate about. And that anybody can do. I'm easily replaceable. So why bother? Why was I put here? You know? And I could say the preachy answer is here to spread the gospel. And that's true. But beyond that, I meant to be a doctor. Well, I don't think I was smart enough for that, But what else? Dead Poet Society, when Rob Williams says, whether it be, police officer, I'm paraphrasing, or being a doctor, or this or that, scientist, these are noble pursuits and are necessary to sustain life. But art, poetry, music, this is what we stay alive for. I think that's why I read so much. I got out of reading a bit once I was in high school because it became like something I had to do instead of something I liked to do. And I got into video games, and I still like video games, but as you get older, you just find yourself with less time to do those things. And then I waste my time going an hour away to learn how to act. And who knows if I'll even be successful in that. But at least it's something, instead of just wasting away. But again, that's what they're kind of doing, right? But then that begs the question, is it worth it to do so? I guess you should read the book and find out. But I've been very vague. But there's not much in terms of the story is pretty straightforward. It's just more about the interactions between father and son. And because of the way that Carmac McCarthy writes his books, it's quite fun because the way the dialogue goes in these books, because of the way he does his quotations and stuff, you can really infer and inflict a whole bunch of different emotions and tones however you want throughout the text because of how he doesn't particularly describe it. So there's a lot of fathers talking to sons, sons talking to father, and then the son goes, okay, and then the father goes, okay. End of scene. But within that could be so many different meanings just based on the way that you decide that was being said. And I think that's part of the fun. I think that is the only negative to the film, and that's inherent because it's a film. In the book, you are transcribing everything into your reality, so the nuances, the inflections, the tone of voice changes for particular scenes, whether it be there's a scene with an old man, there's a scene with a guy taking a piss. All those scenes can be different variations or the end of the book, depending on how you read it. But in the book, or in the movie, of course, you have actual actors and stuff, so it's going to be portrayed a specific way, thereby kind of demystifying or going against the ambiguity of it. But I think that's a lot of fun and something worth reading. I'm getting some spoilers. If you don't want any spoilers, there's the way out. Okay, I only have a couple. The father and the son find a Coke, an unopened Coke bottle that's still good, or a can. And it's the little things to provide happiness, The son starts drinking the Coke. He's like, man, that's bubbly, that's tasty. And because he's innocent, because he's good, he offers to his father. His father's like, no, I don't want it. It's for you. But of course, the son goes, I want you to have some. It's little things like that. They find a man burned alive by lightning. We get a flashback to the man's wife, who essentially has given up. She doesn't see the life they're living as a life worth having. She suggests to her husband that he should off himself and off their kid because they would be better off than continuing to live on. She won't force them to, and the man won't do it. But she says, regardless of your decision, I am going. I can't bear it. Doesn't say goodbye to her son, leaves her husband coldly, and walks off. What happens to her, we don't know. I'm sure she did die, but we never get particular confirmation of that fact. And I'm not making her out to be the villain. I don't think the story is either. But she gave in to despair, as I think many people do, and she decided that it wasn't worth it. And I think it's easier said than done when we live in the era we live in. But when you live like that, day by day, scrounging for food, do you want that to be your life? But again, I reiterate back to the ancient past. Again, we think of cavemen as ignorant and stupid and dumb. Maybe they were, but they still cared about their families. They still had some sort of society. They had some sort of communication and art of some sort. They had entertained themselves. And sure, they were mostly just being hunters and gatherers back then. But so do most animals. Do we say that that life isn't worth living because it's not living life the way we do? Now, that's a whole other thing with veganism and everything. I'm not qualified for that. I'm just saying, I'm begging the question whether just because every day is a struggle, whether that is worth giving up on it. But I would go to an old Superman comic where a woman was about to jump off a building, and he talks to her, and she says, "I'll talk to you, but you have to promise if I decide to jump, you'll let me." And so they talk. And Superman goes, I had a friend, she was terminally ill, and she decided that she would not have any more good days, and so she killed herself. I'm paraphrasing. And he says, I understood. I didn't approve. Still don't. But I understood. But if you think it's even possible that there might be just one more happy day out there, and take my hand. And I wish in this story Superman did exist, and then she had that moment instead of killing herself, which I think is the biggest tragedy whenever it happens in fiction or reality. One of the biggest. I've certainly struggled with it as well, just to be completely honest. I still think about it. I just can't do it. I know some people would miss me, and I don't want to cause others pain. But yeah, life isn't always the most hard. But then I go, oh, I'm not suffering in like another country where I'm starving all the time. That's true. But the problem with being an overthinker is the brain. The brain can be its own prison. There's a confrontation between the father and a masked man. And then they run away from that and they escape. And then they come across an old man. Father, rather hostile. But the son says, no, please feed him, father. Feed him. So they feed him. They have dinner together. This is where we get one of the famous lines, that the man says that my child to me is God. And the old man's like, what a scary thing that would be, walking along with God in a world like this. And if God still exists, if he ever did, doesn't care about us now, he abandoned us. Even just the little inflections of the old man. I really like the old man in the book, and I was not particularly fond of a lot of the casting choices for all the side characters in the film, minus the guy that played the old man. I think that guy did an exquisite job. And as I said in non-spoiler, I just wrote, Sun is the light. Constantly throughout this book, whenever the darkness seems to enrapture the father to make him become a worse person, it is always the sun that kind of keeps him upright. and keeps them from turning into the bad guys as they go. They always talk about the good guys and the bad guys, and the constant search for the good guys. And we don't exactly know what it is. Is it whatever caused the world to end that has gotten the father sick? Is it the multiple wounds he's sustained? Or just surviving without proper health care and just eventually getting sick? I don't know. Maybe he got cancer. We never get a particular answer, but he gets sick and he dies and he breaks his promise to his son that they would always be together. They have to depart because he's dying. The boy must become a man himself. Kind of much like the kid from Blood Meridian, except that the son is actually a good person. And then we get to the ending. A very ambiguous ending, mind you. Again, we don't have... The story just kind of ends abruptly. And again, because of the way the inflections are in the text, you just kind of have to make it up on your own. A man comes asking the kid a bunch of questions, claims he's not a cannibal, claims he's got kids, not his, but he's got a young boy around his age and a young girl, that they don't eat people. And he promises that he's also carrying the fire, and they depart together. If you're really cynical, that boy's dead. He kept on to the fire, he held on to the light, held on to the goodness, but was betrayed for it, if you want to be a terrible person and take that assumption of the text. Or you can take a more hopeful approach. That really was true. And so the light, the fire, kindles on in those people. Now, if you do want an objective, happier answer, you have to watch the film. In the film, not only do we have that scene, we have an additional scene where a dog shows up, a young boy, a young girl, and a woman, all seeming to be very kind as they go off with the kid, kind of definitively showing that he's going to have a happy ending, possibly. I mean, as much of a happy ending as you can in a post-apocalypse setting. But you know what? I like to accept that as canon in my head. I think this book is so mired in darkness and melancholy that it almost begs and absolutely demands that it resolutes in a positive manner for catharsis of any sort. But of course, as I said, the novel itself is interpretive, so you can accept that however you want to accept that. It could be the worst ending possible, the worst outcome. But really, that's up for you to decide and how you read the text. I think it's some of the most fun of McCarthy's writing is how he does that quite often. He's quite good with descriptions, he's quite good with dialogue, even though it's a bit unusual with how he goes about orchestrating his pages. But overall, The Road is another banger by Carmac McCarthy. He's not written a bad book yet. All of them have been excellent novels, like actual, absolute cinema, absolute literature, stuff worth a read, that you should read, I should say, before you die. I don't know what's in store next for us, but you can be assured, because of Carmac McCarthy specifically, because of this man, his entire catalog will be read through my channel, unless I die beforehand. And because of Carmac, on top of fantasy, on top of sci-fi, on top of sword and sorcery and space opera, and classic fantasy and classic sci-fi, on top of all of that, we should also be including different genres, stuff that I don't usually read. Historical fiction, thrillers, detective, things that are outside my wheelhouse will be included, and that also includes, at least from Washington Post, and I'll find more as I go along, some of the top 100 Western literature of all time. So yes, we'll be getting into some of those classics like The Great Gatsby or Moby Dick, or go to some older stuff like Dante's Inferno and Paradise Lost, and so on and so forth. We are going all the way. Hopefully I have a long life that I can get through all this, and it can help with the depression, that I can at least get through all these books. Carmac McCarthy has inspired me. I want to read, not to say that fantasy literature isn't real literature, but I want to read more of that classical stuff that sometimes we're forced to read in school and then you immediately dislike because you had to read it in school. And I'm hoping now that I like reading and I'm not being forced to read anything, that I can find myself loving things that I never originally appreciated. So that is the future of this channel moving forward for all of 2026, 2027, all the way up until I die or YouTube crashes and burns as a platform. I don't know. But no matter what, I'll be reading till the day I die, and it's thanks to The Road and Blood Meridian that I'm willing to explore outside my wheelhouse. So thank you so much, Carmac McCarthy, and may he rest in peace. Despite some of the things that have been talked about in the past. Still, he's given some excellent books, regardless of any controversy surrounding him. Anyway, guys, live long and prosper. And because of, I also said this in the Blood Meridian book, but I think it applies here, and because my channel started as a Star Wars Expanded Universe channel, or really started, I should say, I'll leave you with this quote, because I think it aptly fits The Road by Carmac McCarthy. I wouldn't be shocked if Stover thought about this a little bit when he wrote the Episode 3 novelization. But one candle is enough to hold back the darkness. Or love is a candle. One candle is enough to hold back the darkness. And love can ignite the stars. Till next time.